Nancy, you're on a speaking tour here in the Bay Area, talking about your near-death experience. And I understand that you've just given a workshop on communicating with the spirit world. Could you tell me what that's like?
Sure. Yeah, actually, during my near death experience, I was in such profound communication with my own spiritual guide and several other beings that were with her that when I came back into my body, that was the first thing that I missed because the communication was immediate, it was profound, it was heart to heart. It was without words. It wasn't speaking like, you and I would speak now. But that was when I came back, it felt like when I lost that communication, it felt like my entire family had been ripped away from me all at once. So that was the first thing I wanted to reestablish was, if I could, that communication with my spiritual guide and some of those higher, I call them higher beings that I encountered while I was during my NDE.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked on my own and with some other teachers to learn how to establish that communication again, both in a meditative state and in real time. And that's what I've developed over the last almost 3 years now, is a way that I can communicate with my own spiritual guidance system
Mm-hmm.
and with even higher entities if I so choose, in a immediate way, as well as what I call kind of a more removed way, so that I get guidance later. So I have a real-time communication system and then kind of a delayed communication system.
Yeah. Now you've had the benefit of having had this experience so that it would be less difficult for you to communicate with this non-physical realm.
Right.
But how would you go about teaching someone to do this who has not had this experience?
Yeah, that's always been a question for me. From the initial moment I started doing this myself, I wanted to teach other people how to do it. So the first thing that I do is I teach people how to get to a quiet state up here, because the first thing you need to do is to learn how to quiet the chatter of your mind a little bit. You don't have to be perfect with it, but if you can work to quiet the chatter of your mind a little bit, then you'll be able to hear or sense or intuit that spiritual communication a little bit easier. So I teach people my preferred way to quiet my mind, which is called contemplative prayer. It's a type of meditation that's a little bit easier for beginners to kind of grab onto and work with. So once they learn that basics of contemplative prayer or quieting the mind in whatever way works for them, then I teach them about how to listen to their own intuition and what that sounds like or feels like to each person feels that differently. So we talk a lot about that and how to enhance that in their lives. And then I teach them how to combine contemplative prayer with sending out love, because the communication from us to the spiritual realm, really, if you will, the wires that run back and forth to the spiritual realm are really based on the field of love, of divine love.
Mm-hmm.
And we can access that here, which is what I've learned on my own and from my NDE. But sending out love like a beacon, like a lighthouse would send out a pulse of light during the fog, that's a beacon or a calling to the higher spiritual realms. In fact, they've told me that your love is a beacon to us. So I teach people how to invoke those higher spiritual realms by really getting in touch with sending out love, and then quieting themselves and listening and paying attention to what comes in. So we quiet, we send out love, we quiet again, ask for that communication, and then just wait.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in short how it goes. So it tends to be the first time people try it, that very immediate connection. We get about 50% of the people that are getting real connection right away. By the second time we try it, maybe 70% of the people are there. And then it does develop over time. So I have people practice and practice and practice. And eventually, most people can access spiritual communication in some way over the course of maybe a month or two as they continue to work with it.
Yeah. Question, what is spiritual communication? Are you communicating with spiritual entities or communicating with a different form of consciousness? How would you phrase it?
What I would call it is I would call it a higher state of consciousness. So I've been able to communicate with what I personally call the divine consciousness or divine presence, which to me is kind of the ultimate, source presence.
Mm-hmm.
That's very rare for me to be able to do that. What I tend to do is I communicate with higher beings, meaning not recently deceased people. I don't do the recently deceased because I'm not familiar with how that all works, because it can be a little dicey. So I intentionally try to communicate with beings who are at a consciousness level that's pretty highly advanced spiritually. So we might, they don't call themselves this, but we might call them the angelic realm. They don't call themselves that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what we might refer to them as, or beings, spiritual beings who have had a high level of enlightenment, perhaps like the Buddha or Jesus, or Mary Magdalene, or some beings who have achieved a state of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I really try to communicate with, because for me it feels better, it's clearer, it's easier for me to work with those beings.
Sure. Okay, let's go directly to that realm. Tell us about your near-death experience.
Okay. So I'll be brief about it. I was in Colorado 3 years ago now, in January of 2014, and I was bicycling in a small town just outside of Boulder, Colorado, and was hit broadside. So I was bicycling, like this, and was hit broadside by a woman driving a very large SUV. And she was texting while she was driving and didn't pay attention. Anyway, long story short, I was really severely injured during that crash and had 24 bones that were broken, most in my spine and neck. And when I was brought to the emergency room in the trauma center, it was determined I needed surgery to fix my spine, which, not a surprise, it was pretty well busted up and shattered in one place. So 2 days later, I was brought into surgery. And what they were going to do is put titanium rods along my back to stabilize it so it would heal. And during that surgery, when they gave me anesthesia, we're not really sure exactly why this happened, because I was fairly healthy going into it. But I basically coded on the operating table. My heart rate went to zero, flatlined. My blood pressure went to zero. Everything stopped for at least 2 minutes, up to 3 minutes. And I didn't know that at the time, because when they gave me the anesthesia, I just drifted off, and all of a sudden I was in this beautiful realm. To newbies to this, I call it heaven, but that's not a good term for me. But I was in the spiritual realm. I was up on this beautiful hilltop overlooking many, many, many layers of mountains with beautiful trees all around me. And everything glowed, like with a silvery, energetic undertone. Even the sky was pearly blue, which is really difficult to describe, to have a metallic blue sky, but that's kind of what it felt like. But immediately what struck me wasn't the landscape. It was the feeling of love coming through from this place that I was in, or the state that I was in, coming through me, and this acceptance and welcoming. And it's very profound for me, because before all this happened, I was wavering back and forth for 20 years between being an agnostic and an atheist. I didn't believe really in any of this stuff. I didn't believe in a spiritual realm. I didn't believe in any kind of a higher consciousness or a deity or anything like that. I just believed material, this is all that existed. And then when we die, that was it. So when I woke up in this beautiful place with this love and acceptance just immediately around me, and I thought, oh my gosh, I looked around like this and I thought, I think I died. And I wonder if this is what heaven is like. And as soon as I thought that, then I wondered, this was an internal wondering. I thought to myself, but I don't believe in any of this. Why am I here? And I immediately got, it wasn't really a voice I heard with my ears. It was a voice I heard inside of me that said, you are my child, welcome home. You are loved beyond all measure. And I lost it. I started crying because it was so welcoming. I said, I don't believe in you. How come I'm here? And again, the message was, you belong here. This is your home. And I just stood with that and sat with that for what felt like days. And eventually, a being approached me who appeared to be female, although she said that was a form that she took in order to make it easier for me to relate to her. She looked like a human-ish female, nothing really clearly defined, but vaguely, human. She appeared to have long hair and, had a vaguely human shape and a vaguely female shape. But she again welcomed me with love, and it was love that I felt through me. It was really odd. I could feel that love was a force coming through me, and it was a welcoming, peaceful kind of thing. And she said, I'm going to be your guide for the next little while. I'm going to teach you about this place and what you need to know to take back into your own life so that you can make your life better and what you want it to be. And when she said, you're going to go back to your life, I just immediately said, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here with you. And she said, no, it's your mission, your purpose to go back. So we argued about that sort of for a little while, and eventually she explained to me that I had agreed to go back, that I wasn't meant to stay here, and that I had accepted that already prior to my birth.
How did you understand that?
She showed it to me from her own perspective. So she showed me myself in a very vaguely kind of spiritual form, and I knew it was me, agreeing to this with kind of a small council of other beings, agreeing to what I was going to do, but from her own perspective. So she was one of these entities or spiritual entities that was around me, but she showed me that whole scene from her perspective. She kind of put it right into my mind and into my heart. But I could also sense it from my own perspective as well. So I was beginning to remember. I saw it it was really odd. I saw it from both my own and from her perspectives. Hers was stronger. But as soon as she showed all this to me and I heard myself, here we would say I agreed to a contract, but it was really more of a verbal or a heartfelt contract. When I remembered that I agreed to that with my heart, then it was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to be going back.
When did you agree to this?
Before my birth into this body. Mm-hmm. So that's,
So when did you know that?
I only knew that during my NDE. I didn't remember it until the middle of kind of my near-death experience.
Right. Okay.
So it was part of getting me to be okay with being sent back here was, you already agreed to do this. Here's what it looked like. Mm-hmm. See if you can remember that. And I did.
How long do you feel that you were in this place?
It's, it's hard to put it into any kind of a definite time, but for me it felt like 2 to 3 months because of all of the stuff that she taught me.
Were there days there, as we understand days here?
No,
Was there a sun there?
there was just a sense of all-pervading light. There wasn't like a point source of light like we would think of the sun. It was just the entire sky was lit up with a pearly, beautiful light. There wasn't a sense of days like, daytime and nighttime. It was just all daylight.
Could you even call this a place?
It really wasn't a place. I call it a realm because I quickly understood, and she explained to me that the trappings that I saw around me, the plants or the mountains or, the trees, the landscape was really not real because I was in an in-between place. I wasn't quite fully in the spiritual realm, and I obviously wasn't in physical. I was in a place that was to prepare me, if I was to fully die, it was a place, or a state, I will say, that was to prepare me for being fully spiritual. So it was a realm or a state where it was comfortable for me to be there. So there were the outward appearance of trees and mountains and things that I was familiar with. But at the same time, they weren't quite, what we would see here. So a tree might have blue leaves with pulses of energy underneath that blue surface. So it sort of looked like here, but with layers of energy kind of underneath the surface of things.
Did you understand what you had to do in order to be prepared to go to the other place?
We didn't even discuss going further fully into spiritual because I already knew, and she knew that I wasn't going there. But
I'm sorry. There's something funny about that. But okay.
Yeah, no, but eventually she mentioned that this place this state that I was in, for most people when they fully die, they go into this state, in this in-between state, to let go of their attachment to their human form and to let go of their attachment to anything that happened here and to have their life review, because this was the state where people have their life review. And then once they let go of those attachments, then they can move on. But I don't fully know what that part of it looked like, what the letting go of those attachments might look like.
Yeah. You were an atheist before this experience, or wavering between atheism and agnosticism. You must have had a particular image of God that you didn't believe in.
Right.
What was that?
Yeah, I was raised in the Roman Catholic faith, and so the God that I was raised supposedly to believe was of a very Caucasian man with a big white beard sitting on a cloud. And even from the time I was a little child, I took exception to that because even as a little kid, I didn't really fully believe that a divine being would be necessarily a guy who looked white with a white beard. It just seemed weird to me.
How has your idea of God changed since this experience?
So,
if I can use the word God.
Yeah, and well, that's a good point because I go back and forth. People are very comfortable with that word God. When I refer to this divine consciousness or divine presence myself, I refer to it typically as a divine presence or divine spirit. But to me, it's not gender specific. It's all genders and none at all at the same time. It's all beings and no specific being at the same time. It's more of a universal consciousness, if you will.
Right. Was this? Would you say that before your experience, this divine realm or this divine spirit or entity was something that would be inconceivable to you?
Completely.
So, but it's clear to you now.
Yeah. And I don't know why that is. I mean, only because maybe I experienced it directly.
Yeah, sometimes I have a I've heard other near-death experiences talk about this, and what they experience in their near-death experience would have been inconceivable to them before. So, if God is inconceivable, then how can you believe in that? Do you see what I mean? How can you believe in something that you can't conceive of? I mean, if believing and not believing are on this same level, then how can you believe in a God that you can't imagine? I'm not making myself very clear, but it seems to me that in this realm, how can you believe in God if you haven't had the experience that you have had?
Right. Yeah, for me now it's a knowing. But I also admit that I don't know much really. I'm not omniscient at this point. I mean I know what I know is that I've touched on something much grander and more profound, and I knew it in my heart that this consciousness was grander and bigger than me. But like you said, if I haven't had that experience, how can I believe in it? And I think that's why I walked away from it when I was in my teens, because I couldn't conceive of anything other than material reality, and I couldn't conceive of a consciousness that spanned the entire universe. It's still really tough for me to wrap my brain around that, and I try not to wrap my brain around it because it's more of for me now, an inner knowing. But it's a difficult question to answer for somebody who hasn't had this experience. I've recently read some work by Rupert Sheldrake, who I haven't really I haven't even heard of him up until maybe a few months ago, and I think he starts to kind of get at what this might be, not necessarily one being, but really the universe itself is consciousness in and of itself. But again, I don't really know how to explain it other than the universe truly is conscious at a level that you and I as humans in this physical reality will probably have difficulty fully wrapping our brains around. Mm-hmm. And it is a mystery. A lot of people want to get, we want the answer because we're human. We want to know. And there's a bit of a mystery to it all that even still today I can't really quite, I can't answer that.
Have you ever wondered if you were delusional?
Oh, of course. That was the first thing I thought when I came back. Was, oh my gosh, somebody's going to commit me to the insane asylum, because this was crazy. It felt, when I woke up, I thought, did that really happen? And I'll say a couple things. First, when I was there in that experience, I knew that it was more real than anything here. And to me, this was the dream, and as crazy as that sounds, this felt like the dream and that felt like reality. Or really, I should say, I knew this was the dream and I knew that was reality. But luckily for me, when I came back into my physical body, I'm kind of I guess a black sheep anyway. So I did toy with that question for a while. Am I really crazy? And then I thought, no, I'm not crazy, because I know that was real. I got information that I didn't know before. It was so profound a change in me that for weeks I was just living in this state of blissful gratitude, weeping all the time at how beautiful it was. And my entire relation to the world changed for the better. So nothing that a hallucination would cause. I have actually had one unfortunate incident of hallucinating as a result of an allergic reaction to a medication. And that was it didn't make any sense. It was irrational, illogical. And I woke up feeling just ill and not profoundly changed. So I knew this was different. And then I had the good fortune of my physician believing in me and explaining that this has happened to other people that he has treated, which was a godsend, truly a godsend. And a chaplain in the hospital also said, a Lutheran chaplain said, this is real. I've also seen this with other people. So you're not crazy. And it was widely accepted within my own circle of friends and family, which surprised me. And that doesn't always happen for a lot of people. So I was blessed, really, to have people around me who said, we believe you. And professionals who said, this is real. So that helped. Yeah.
So now that you're back here in this realm, if we can put it that way, you've described this realm as being a dream. How does it feel living in a dream?
At first it was difficult because I didn't know how to be back here in the physical and deal with a lot of the craziness that goes on as a part of this human existence, because we all have, we have this human ego that we deal with, and the human culture that we have isn't necessarily blissful and spiritual and loving all the time. So that was difficult at first, to learn how to be here but not be consumed by that. Mm-hmm. And eventually what I realized I needed to do, and it took a while for me to get there, is all of this information that I was given during my NDE, I realized, that was meant for me to come back and live this dream in a very healthy way. My guide gave me all this information, and if I didn't put it into practice, I'd be miserable. So it was things like, while you're here in this physical state, learn how to love other people and just give love out. Learn how to really be grateful in each moment for what you have, and just focus on what you've got right now. Not what you maybe want in the future, but just focus on making your life better. Focus on the gratitude now. Mm-hmm. And basically just do the things that she taught me how to do, and practice the things she taught me to practice, mm-hmm. in order to really just live this dream the best that I can.
Nancy, what was the most unexpected thing you learned about yourself when you were on the other side?
That I am worthy of my own love.
Oh.
Because, before, I would say I'm not unusual in that before my NDE, I really didn't like myself very much. And some points in my life really kind of hated myself. Mm-hmm. I didn't have much self-love. And I think, well, obviously I was an atheist, so I didn't really believe in the own divine center inside of me, that connection to the divine presence. So I think that whole chunk where I learned that I truly was in connection with the divine presence, that I was worthy of my own love, mm-hmm. was the biggest shocker to me. Like, really, I'm a part of this? I'm not separate from this. This isn't another entity out there. I'm connected to this spiritual source. That's beautiful, and that's part of me. Mm-hmm. That was amazing to me.
Would you have called yourself a very independent person before this experience?
Exceedingly independent. Yeah. To the point of ridiculousness.
In what way?
I shunned help. I kind of used my independence as a block to keep people away. So if somebody would offer to help me, I would always politely refuse. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to do things on my own. And what I didn't realize back then was that was an awfully good way to build up a wall between me and everybody else. Because people in this society, good people, want to be helpful to other people. Mm-hmm. But me refusing that put up a gentle barrier between me and everybody else.
And it was also a way of making what was already a dream even more dreamlike or unreal.
Right.
Yeah. So, what words of advice would you give yourself? Would you give to the person that you were before you had this experience? What one word of advice would you give to yourself?
Can I make it 2 words?
Sure, sure. Make it as many as you like. Paragraphs even.
Love more. Accept love. So give it out, accept it in, and live in gratitude as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that without necessarily, believing in a consciousness or a divine consciousness greater than your own. But just, love, be compassionate, and be grateful for what you have in the moment.
Nancy, you've written a book, Awakenings from the Light, 12 Lessons Learned from an NDE, Near-Death Experience. Why did you write this book?
Well, initially I wrote the book for me, and I wrote it also for my family. So when I came back into my body, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to take notes and write down everything that I experienced so I wouldn't forget it, because it was a lot of information. So I started writing notes, and the notes became notebooks, and I had, I think, 2 or 3, it was like two full notebooks of stuff that I wrote. And I kind of started talking about this with some friends, and some friends encouraged me to write a blog so that other people could benefit. Interestingly enough, during my NDE, my guide said, you're being given this information for yourself and for your family first, to improve your life and the lives of your family. She also said, but at some point in the future, other people might benefit as well. So when my friends suggested a blog, I thought, well, everybody's going to think I'm nuts. But one of the things I was asked to do was to share this. And I thought, well, a blog's a pretty innocuous way to share it. So I'll start with the blog. And I shared quite a bit of the basic information out on the blog, and it's still sitting out there on the Ethernet somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I started sharing in the blog, and I thought, there's a lot here, an awful lot that is going to be difficult in the blog to kind of develop in any depth. For me anyway, I have a difficult time reading blogs unless they're really short little, tidbits of information. So that guidance I got from my guide, my spiritual guide, once we reestablished contact regularly, she actually suggested putting it in book format. And also my friend said...
This entity on the other side suggested you put it in book format?
Yeah, and I was kind of adamant about...
How did she do that?
We had just had a chat one day.
She was giving you practical information?
Yeah, and it wasn't, you should do this. She said, you might want to think about putting this in a book for other people, because it might be easier for other people to read that way. Mm-hmm. And my initial reaction was, no, I'm not doing that. And I just put up a block. I said, I don't want to go there. Because it felt like I would be putting too much of myself out there if I did that. And it was kind of scary.
Right. So you feel, this is the last question I have for you. You feel that the universe is conscious?
I do. And that consciousness goes everywhere and through everything.
And you didn't know this before? Mm-mm. Okay, tell us a little bit more about that.
You mean the before or the now?
The after.
The after, yeah. So what I saw and felt and experienced was that divine love or divine consciousness as a part of everything in both this physical realm and in that spiritual. And for me, I could see it as kind of energy tendrils. It's tough to describe. It would be like a multi-dimensional lattice work of energy going through everything. And so even in this physical realm, we actually discussed this yesterday at my workshop, even the plants would have a level of consciousness. The rocks would have a level of universal consciousness going through them.
Rocks on the other side or rocks here?
Here.
Uh-huh.
So it's not, the way that it was put to me is divine love is everywhere and divine consciousness is everywhere. There is nowhere that it is not. That's a little kind of kludgy wording, but that's how it is. That's that divine, that universal consciousness is a part of everything in this realm. Not necessarily attached to a brain like ours is, but there is just a certain level of energetic consciousness that goes through everything. And again, you know, some people in the workshop yesterday questioned that, and I don't really know how to describe it other than, if you know, for me now, if I go to, let's say, the Redwoods, which I did on my way down here from the Seattle area, when I kind of stood next to some of these huge ancient trees or sat next to them and let myself go into my spiritual communication state, I could sense and hear and know some of the things that they've experienced as trees. I know that sounds absolutely insane. And my old scientists would think I was absolutely crazy. But I could get a sense of that divine consciousness in that tree and what that felt like. It wasn't, you know, a verbal communication. It was more of a feeling communication. So it is everywhere. And it's very much, again, I don't know Rupert Sheldrake at all, but he talks about this in many of his books. And I'm starting to get a sense of what he's talking about now, that consciousness is a part of everything, and everything has layers of this consciousness in it.
Nancy, is there one last thing you'd like to tell the viewers of this video before we close up?
Yeah, work, you know, if there's anything that I've learned that can be helpful in your life, it might be, you can't, you know, you can't save the world by yourself, the entire world, but you certainly can work on making your life the best that you can, and that starts with being a source of compassion and kindness as much as possible. And so that's what I would encourage people, is just in your own life to be a source of compassion and kindness for yourself and others.
Okay, Nancy, thank you so much.
Thank you.